As a student at the University of Michigan Dearborn in the School of Education, I've had many opportunities to develop and enhance my teaching abilities. One of the most influential experiences has been my internship at the Early Childhood Education Center, where I interned in the classroom with children ages 2 to 4. One of my tasks for the internship was to develop a concept for the children to work with throughout the semester. After working with the children and interacting with them, it was easy to see where their interests were. The children really enjoyed doing hands-on activities such as Play-Doh. This gave me an idea for my major concept. Since the children enjoyed Play-Doh and working with it, I thought it might be interesting to see how they felt about creating the Play-Doh. I provided the children with a few simple ingredients that would be used to create the Play-Doh, along with the recipe to follow so they would understand the directions in creating the Play-Doh. Almost immediately, the children seemed interested and engaged in creating the Play-Doh and following the activity. But what was surprising was the children's focus on the recipe and following the directions. Throughout the activity, the children were engaged and cooperating well with each other, discussing what they knew about the ingredients and what they've seen done with them. One child talked to us about how he could make chocolate cake with the flour. The children seemed very interested in the process of following the directions, marking off what we've already done, such as putting scoops of flour into a bowl. After the children were done creating the Play-Doh, they invited other classmates to come and experiment with it. With the interest the children were showing creating the recipe and following the directions, I thought it would be a good time to show the children how to create a recipe. To do this, I offered the children supplies to make goop. It was exciting to watch the children engage in this activity with each other. They were discussing in a group setting what they thought they could do with the materials provided to them. They also discussed what they thought would happen if they added more or less supplies to their goop. Some of the children had goop that was a little bit runny. Others were supporting them and discussing what they did to make theirs more dry. Throughout the activity, the children's goal seemed to be to get a consistent goop amongst all of the group. As with the Play-Doh, the children were very excited to offer other children the opportunity to work with their goop. The children took on a leadership role in this process, talking to other children about how they made it and what they could do with it. The children also recorded what they had done and what materials they had used on a forum developed by myself. Because I knew that we were going to be including food later on in activities as part of our recipes, I decided the children needed to have an experience using the utensils that you might use in a recipe. Children had the opportunity to use knives and Play-Doh that was previously made to practice chopping skills and cutting skills. This was also a time that children were practicing safety skills. The children as a group discussed how they could use the knife safely. They discussed how they would chop and how they would slice food up, and when they might use that in a recipe. One of the children said, "I have to slice pizza when I make pizza." After one of the children brought up the discussion about pizza, all of the children seemed to start having an interest in it. The children began using the Play-Doh to make pizza, and then using their knives to cut the Play-Doh. The children were also discussing what they might put on their pizza. Some of the children said that they would want pepperonis, others said that they would want vegetables. With the obvious interest in food, I decided to provide children with a tasting experience. I provided fruits that were both familiar and unfamiliar to the children for them to taste and sample. As the children came to the table, they began discussing the fruits that were familiar to them and asking questions about the ones that were unfamiliar. One of the children said, "What's that?" pointing to a star fruit. The children then were able to cut up the star fruit and see why it was called a star fruit. They also smelled all the fruits to see how they smelled. Surprisingly, the children tried all of the fruits, even at times when they said, "Ooh, I don't like that." The children also took this opportunity to use the skills they had learned in a previous lesson about chopping and cutting. Often the children reminded each other on safe ways to cut and safe ways to chop. After this activity, we had decided to move back towards recipes now that the children had an opportunity to taste foods to see what they liked and didn't like. I thought it was important that for us to create a recipe, we look at recipes in cookbooks. The children took this experience and looked through recipes that included foods that they would like. After they found foods that they wanted to recreate, children had the opportunity to make their own recipe or recreate a recipe found in a cookbook. The children took time looking at the recipes and trying to recreate them on paper. Again, the children began discussing pizza, so this was naturally the next step that we went to when following recipes. The children had the opportunity to select items that they wanted on their pizzas, such as mushrooms, black olives, green peppers, and onion. They also had the opportunity to practice skills they had learned during earlier lessons, such as chopping, cutting, spreading. It was amazing to see how engaged the children were during this activity. This activity was held within the kitchen at the ECEC. The children were discussing how the kitchen is not an area to play in, it's an area for us to cook in. They took the activity very serious and were engaged in each other's conversation. After the children were done creating their pizzas, we created recipe cards for the pizzas they had made. These recipes will be included in a cookbook for the classroom that I will be sharing a copy with during our class period.